This week's episodes of TLDCast have been brought to you by Mindspace, mindspace.net, the creative learning agency that, oh, by the way, I was just hanging out at on Wednesday and recorded a fantastic session talking about gamification. Check it out in our archives today.
TLDCast, Video Friday. Welcome to Video Friday. We've got a new setup today with Lee Rodrigues. We got some things going on today. You want to ask all your questions in the chat. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Hey, welcome to Video Friday. Thank you very much, Mr. Sam Rogers. That was the amazing Snap Synapse. How's it going today, Sam?
Going good. Yes, Craig has already noticed something that is true. It is true. We are actually in the same room. Yes.
You ruined the illusion so quickly. Dang it.
So quickly. I'm sorry. But but we wanted to be able to demo a couple things that we haven't done before. So we've actually got some live streaming happening from a DSLR camera. We've got a whole setup here for Lee's. What's the little thing called again that you got?
It's called a palette.
Great. So we've got some actual hardware setup that's different than usual, and we wanted to dive into the details and geek out today a little bit about Adobe Premiere, specifically with the transition. Lee and I used to work together on Final Cut Pro mostly. He's made the leap to Premiere, which I've been thinking about doing. So if you're thinking about doing it or just getting started with Adobe Premiere, this is a good episode to watch. Also some just basic instructional design kind of tips and tricks for videos and for animations. And I suppose I should let Lee introduce himself. Take it away, Lee.
So my name is Lee Rodrigues. I'm a Senior Instructional Designer at SunRun. And I met Sam Rogers way back when we worked at YouTube, back with YouTube Certified. And before I did that, I kind of got recruited to YouTube. I was a certified Final Cut Pro instructor at Apple. And when I came to YouTube, there was a whole lot of video that had to be figured out. They had done a great job of making 2 or 3 videos. They only needed to make 93 in 8 weeks.
You're right.
So they kind of had to scale a little bit. And the plan they were using of 1 video at a time was exactly what I taught at the Apple Store, which was cool for a photo of your bird watching thing. But when you're trying to scale 93 instructional videos that currently have no scripts written for them, we had to do some stuff. So I kind of started in Final Cut and been using it for years. And sadly, Final Cut has just not caught up with the times for scaling. So I started using Premiere, and I've learned all kinds of goodies with that. So we'll talk about some of that today.
Yeah, so last night Lee was just telling me about how his setup works, and I thought we should talk about this on TLDcast because we haven't really gotten into editing workflows or setups, how he's got his multi-screen setup and some actual physical hardware that just makes everything look better. So that's what we're talking about today. And even if you don't do Premiere, we'll be talking about some animation stuff and, like I said, some interview kind of tips and tricks and any instructional design questions. So I see there's one question that has already appeared, but there should be more. So ask your questions in the chat. Put them in the question. What do you call that? The question box? The question.
Yeah, I think they need to rename that thing. I always have to call it the Ask a Question section under the video. But you know.
Ah, yes, the Q&A, the ask a question section.
I want to call it the Q&A, but it's not like called the Q&A. So it's like, wait, it's the AAQ maybe? I don't know. Go to the go to the big A, little a Q section underneath the video or something like that. But.
That's good. And Lee, in his great introduction, gave some history, but you actually have a title now, Lee, which is?
I'm a senior instructional designer with a company called SunRun, and we are the largest residential solar installer. So I help train sales reps, installers, and everything else that may pop up that requires either instructional design or video, or maybe asking some cool questions to figure out how do we teach what we just taught, but how do we scale that out to the rest of the country? And what works in a classroom may not work in a virtual classroom. So how do we figure that out, and how do we divide it up? So I'm lucky enough I wanted to be in green business when I was getting out of college, and now I'm kind of doing it. And it's kind of weird. Every morning you wake up, you go, hey, I can actually tell you how many pounds of coal aren't being burned because of what I do.
Yeah, cool stuff.
That's pretty cool. There's a solar company here in Phoenix, in Tempe, I think, Solar One or Solar First or First Solar or something like that. I don't know.
You probably have all of those in Tempe, Arizona.
The sun is kind of a big deal around here. Yeah.
Yeah. Obvious power source. Yeah. So Lee, did you want to, where do you want to start with today?
You know what? Let's do, Sam. Hey, time out quick. We've had Lee on before, and I know people probably know who he is because he's famous. But maybe do a little bit of backgrounder for us, just real quick. I always love to hear people's stories, just briefly, about kind of how you got to where you are. Dial us back a little bit further than your current job, and what kind of got you into geeking out on video stuff.
Well, we're not going to go too far back because I might freak you out. But back in 1996, I lived in a place called Bosnia for a year, and I was in the military, and we basically had a computer system that allowed us to send text messages over a radio, which we now call email. But back then it was pretty complicated to do. And I learned how to use that system, and it turned out I became a technical trainer. That's what I was doing when I was supposed to be doing, running around, climbing trees and all the good stuff you do when you're in the Army. Well, it turns out that's what I was doing. Fast forward a whole bunch of years, I finished my bachelor's degree and decided I wanted to do more with education. And I ended up really loving instructional design. And I was a tech guy. I just fixed computers for many years. I ran my own consulting company. And what kept coming up was every time I would fix something or replace something, there was always a training need. And most of the time, the training need was worse than the hardware. We put a new server in, and your workflow still doesn't make any sense. You're still moving slow, and you're still wasting steps. So it required training almost all the time. And one day I decided I liked the training more than I liked the actual replacing parts, because I felt like a well-paid refrigerator repair guy for the most part, showing up and just replacing stuff and saying, wow, the reason you got a virus, we still haven't addressed, and we kind of need to. So moving all that around, I ended up working for Apple as a genius, and I was fixing computers, and there was a lot of training involved in that. So I started teaching Final Cut Pro. And right about that time, a recruiter on YouTube kept asking me, have you ever thought of doing editing for YouTube? And I was like, I'm trying to think of a person who hasn't. My first day, I met Sam, and Sam said, by the way, they hired 5 consultants in a row, and all 5 of them got fired because they had no video talent. And it's a very tough job. And we meshed and had a whole lot of fun, just realizing, hey, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done here, but what they didn't have was an example of what they wanted. They had a long list of what they didn't want,
right? And
there had been a lot of things that didn't work. So Sam and I just put together a prototype, and they said, that's great. Do that 92 more times. And that's when we started to learn about scaling, not just editing video, but how do you scale? How do you develop a workflow that you can then share? And that's where my transition from Final Cut to Premiere came, because Final Cut is not as easy to scale. The second you want to share this file with someone else, in Final Cut, it typically is a 67 to 70 gigabyte single file. Google Drive loves it when you try to upload a 76 gigabyte single file. What could possibly go wrong? With Premiere, you have maybe a 400 meg file connected to all of your data folders. That can be shared a bit easier. By the way, never try to use Premiere Overdrive. because you'll see it crash. It's pretty cool. But you can transfer files and then work locally. So that whole workflow is what led me to here. And with Sam, after all that, we realized a lot of people just can't do a basic screencast. And they're trying to jump into Premiere when the screencast itself wasn't very well scripted.
Right.
The end objective wasn't very well defined. And now we're going to fix it in post. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're going to move elements around a timeline for a couple hours and then cry for a little bit and then
right.
figure out what to do next. How can I come up with some VO to make this all make sense? Who's been there before? VO will fix this project.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who you hire. They got to have words to say that, make sense.
I know. Like we're missing music and text animations. That's what we really need.
Right.
And what it came down to is Sam has a saying that I live by. It's sometimes you have to pick things up, dust the stupid off of them, and then put them back down again.
So we've worked together before, not just at YouTube, but also at DevLearn. We did a session together last time about screencasting, and we've just been buds ever since that project, but have done some other little experimental fun things, and Lee also has a background as being a stand-up comic and doing other fun, like circusy Burning Man type stuff that we have in common. So yeah, and now I stay on his couch from time to time. So.
And one of the main things that I've learned from Sam, and this is something that I can't stress enough, sometimes those creative projects you work on that become very complicated, they are the most useful things you can do. When you try to solve all those problems on your own, I've found almost every time I will find myself working on a project, and when I find myself stuck, it's like, that one time I tried that animation thing, I could try that here, and you find a solution. So sometimes when you're muddling through something difficult late into the night, it may not be that project that it pays off. It may just be late and crappy, but 3 months later, it's like, wow, now I know where that would fit. And it probably wasn't a night before change. When you say, oh, no, I'm going to change the entire timeline right now before no, don't. It's probably not a good idea. Probably not night before.
Idea. Awesome. Hey, you know what? Let's jump right into your setup because it's just killing me. And that's just going to be gold. I don't know if you guys have a plan or an idea of how you want to go through and talk about this, but let's jump right into that so we don't find ourselves running out of time because there's going to be a lot of questions. I'm certain of it.
Well, we are setting up right now. So what we're going to do I'll tell you what, let's set an agenda so our learners can follow and understand what to expect. What we're going to do first is we're going to demo the hardware system that I have. And then you're probably going to wonder, well, how are we actually live streaming with a Canon 80D to do this to begin with? Then we'll go back and talk about how we did that. Sound good?
That sounds fantastic. I'm dying to hear.
Okay, and we may need to do a little zoom on this one in a minute. But what I'm going to show here first, Sam, let's do a wide of what we have here. I edit with Premiere. So how I've set up here.
Let's start right there because I am curious about that. So being a Final Cut guy, having worked with Apple, you kind of explained like the scaling and the sharing of the content as a reason to switch over to Premiere. But is that the only reason? How have you found Premiere in comparison to Final Cut?
Couple things. There's always the trade-off of a couple things Final Cut does better than Premiere and a couple things that Premiere does better than Final Cut. One of the big ones is sometimes you want to do really classy titles. And when you want to do really classy titles, what do you make them in? Often you make them in Photoshop, right? Mm. And then you make a really cool title and you will put it into your edit. When you're using Final Cut, every time you change that title, you delete an element, you add the element back in, and there you go, right? It works out. With Premiere, you can drag the Photoshop PSD into the Premiere timeline. And while you're editing, any change you make to your title in Photoshop is immediately updated within the timeline. So you can add way better detail doing that. And then in Premiere, you can actually double click on that Photoshop image and it will show you all the layers and you can animate all the layers individually, which makes super fast animation. Again, if you're doing really beautiful titles and text treatments, that might make sense. For a lot of the YouTube folks who are just cutting between images and interview and music, Final Cut is just fine. The problem you run into Final Cut is the second you try to hand that project to somebody else who isn't right next to you.
Gotcha.
That's where the scaling becomes a little problem.
Yeah.
Love it.
And to be honest, the reason I started using Premiere is I work at SunRun and I have two amazing people who are very good at Premiere, and one of them might as well be an instructor. He's that good, and he started teaching me some really cool stuff. And the problem is I couldn't share my Final Cut animations with him very easily. And we wanted to standardize what things looked like. And that meant setting up some custom sequences. And the second we did that, wow, it worked better.
And
So what
Premiere
that meant
works
was
on
like,
Mac?
what's that?
Premiere works on a Mac?
Premiere works really well on a Mac.
Yeah.
The thing about the Mac is it's got double the RAM speed for rendering, which means when you actually hit export, the Mac will perform much faster than the PC does, which is really nice. And
Cool.
I'll show you a couple things that I did to Premiere to make it work a little better, because I love the multi-screen feature of Final Cut, but Premiere gives a couple other things that are kind of, it's not the same, but it's very similar and pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, cool. Good to know. All right, let's jump in and check out your setup.
Okay, so first the setup. The first most important thing is Nikola Tesla.
Right.
You have to have him anywhere you edit. He's very important. He keeps it all together. We have two 27-inch monitors running through what is called a landing zone dock here. And the landing zone dock, all my monitors, all my drives, all my stuff is hooked into my landing zone dock, which gives me, the standard MacBook Pro gives me 3 USB 2s in the back, USB 3s in the back. So I can run all my high-speed stuff back there, which means all my monitors, my microphone, and everything, I just snap the laptop in, and all that comes to life. So I don't have to mess with cables or anything. That works pretty well.
What's that called again?
It's called a landing zone dock, and they make one specifically for the 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina. And the more people you talk to will find the only computer Apple makes that's usable for Premiere and Final Cut and all that right now is the 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina. Unless you want to go with a big giant desktop. And that makes this laptop work quite well. And the Retina likes to get hot, and it elevates it a bit and allows it to cool down a lot, which is really nice. So what I find here is by having these guys set up, can you come over to this one here? I'll show you. So that's the hardware. And then with Premiere, you have your main box window that you control in, but you can pop any window that you edit in out into its own window. So normally down here at the bottom, I would have my timeline. But what I did is my timeline is this entire 27-inch window over here. So I see everything that I'm editing, and I can get into glorious detail by zooming way in with the big screen. And I found that to make it a lot easier to see what I'm doing. So pulling these elements out, there's actually a command undock panel. And that's pretty cool. So number two, a thing that most people don't know about Premiere that's kind of ridiculous, is sometimes I'm looking for a piece of media and you have one screen in Final Cut. If I click on any window by hitting the tilde button, I can make that go full screen. Any window can go full screen, which allows you to make the most use of when you're trying to review something, you can play it at full screen. Yeah. But you don't always want it to be that way, and dragging corners can drive you a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice down here to be able to do that. And of course, normally this entire timeline would be jammed into the bottom screen. But because I have it over here, I can get really detailed on it, and I can start playing with layers and everything else. So I'll stop there for a second and see if anyone has any questions on that.
There's a ton of questions in the Q&A section. So did we already answered what is your opinion on voiceover? Is it always necessary in videos?
Is
kind
voiceover
of a distraction, but
well, I would say this much. I use voiceover if I can't record an interview good enough to capture it. I would much rather have a subject matter expert that is trusted and respected come out of their mouth than I would voiceover. Because in my mind, sometimes voiceover is, I am the big training god, and I'm telling you that this is right. That's very different than a peer saying, this works, and I have the bonuses to show for it.
Gotcha. I love that answer.
And also, one of the things that we covered in our DevLearn session was doing things completely without any audio. Like if it depends on what your learning objective is and what the format is and stuff like that. But even just doing animated GIFs of instructional content can be really, really effective. You know, just having the English along with it, you're complicating things like translations if you're working multi-language and all that kind of stuff. So voiceover is absolutely fantastic when you need it.
When you need it. And what I use voiceover for is to connect possibly unconnected topics. Nice for transition, nice for introduction.
Yeah.
And I use mainly voiceover. Guys, I use voiceover with animation. If I can stimulate you visually and say a couple words, then that makes sense. It's kind of cool to watch. But just straight voiceover with a slide on the screen, yay. Yeah. That's fun. Yeah. Why don't we just do death by PowerPoint and video? Oh, wait a minute. We already are. I saw another comment that came up, and it's a great point. The pop-out panel technique that I was showing here with Premiere, I also run Windows on this laptop, and I run Windows on all three screens when I'm developing e-learning. And Articulate Storyline has the same pop-out panel. I pop my whole timeline out. In Storyline, I pop all my slide attributes out. So all I'm looking at is the slide, and everything else should be on one of my three screens. So I find that to be pretty handy and pretty cool.
And I just scrolled through all the other questions, and I'm going to just let everybody know that I've seen all of your questions. I'm going to save them for later. While we're going through the setup, I don't want to distract us with those questions. Let's go through the setup and talk about let's geek out on the tech for a little bit, and then I'll jump back into your questions if you guys don't mind.
Well, when you say geek out on the tech, let's specifically geek out on the audio doohickey thingy majiggy to the left of your laptop.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
That's what I was so impressed by.
Let's look at the thingamajiggy. Okay, so this is a tool called the palette. And I'll give you a backstory on the palette. I learned to edit on the old school tape editors. Roll the wheel, jog over, click pause, come over to the other tape, roll the wheel, click pause, record, transfer. That's what I learned on the old video toaster. Before that was all the roller editors. I always wish I could go back to that. So I got something called the palette, which basically gives me that tactile control over editing that I had back in the day, but it's solely digital. So I'll first start. If you notice right now, if Sam shoots it, it has kind of a purple color to it. And the reason it has a purple color is when I make Final Cut, Premiere, the live application, it recognizes that that is happening at this moment. So give me a moment here to bring up my palette app. Okay. So I have a palette app here. I'll bring it up to the top so you can see it. And what it does is it tells me what all of these things are doing. So when I look at this box right here, it reflects to this box right here. And it tells me that one of these will be for zoom in and zoom out, jog. This button will razor all tracks. This one will shuttle. This is play stop. And with this slider here, who doesn't love sliders? You can slide opacity, or I can scale images. All that from this controller here. So, and all of it is completely configurable and changeable. And when I'm sweetening audio, if I come over to here, this allows me to move keyframes back and forth. I can shuttle. I can adjust volume levels. All of that, and I typically go forth from editing to audio. So let's show an example of what this means in action.
And so if you look at, so let me just jump in here real quick. So what you're saying is that panel that you have there to the left of the laptop is customizable. You can tell each one of those dials and switches what you want it to do, what you want it to impact.
Totally configurable and configurable for every application. Photoshop, Premiere, anything.
Totally modular as well. You can
I was just going to say, it looks like you can take it apart. It looks like you can reshape it into different things.
So you can see up here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels hooked up right now. And if I just move this, I've just disconnected the other panels, and it detects only its main drive. That's all that's on it. Everything else is gone. They're all magnetic. And when they snap back together again, it recognizes what's there. If I pull the bottom scaler off, it's now only got one, which means I can add, remove, and change as needed. And I can also program them as needed. I've done a lot of experimenting with it, and it's kind of put me to the phase where I use it a lot in my editing. I haven't used it a lot on the Windows side of the house because it's almost like you see Facebook relationships sometimes. It's complicated with Windows. The Mac and Premiere is pretty easy. They're about $500 around there. And one piece of advice, don't try to find a carrying case. The box that it comes with is the best carrying case you will ever find because each of these things is all packed in foam and protected. So don't throw the box away. You will want it later. Okay, so let me give you guys an example of how this actually works. So I'm going to put the controller down here because I know what it's doing and you know what it's doing. So if I come over here into my editor, I want to scan forward a little bit. So I have a wheel here that I can just go frame by frame by turning this little wheel. And if I want to get in for a tight close, I can actually turn this wheel here, which will zoom me in or zoom me out. Oh. But what's really beautiful about it is you can use tactile pressure, and I can push down on the wheel and zoom in extremely fast or zoom all the way out pretty quickly, which also works for going frame by frame. If I push down, I'll go 5 frames at a jump, which for trying to get to the exact frame for a cut, can I tell you how hard it is to have your right hand to try to drag that mouse one click at a time to get one frame?
Yeah.
This guy here is one frame.
The touchpad.
The touchpad, right? So I also have a start-stop button here, and I have a razor all. So I can just hit the razor all button and cut everything in it. Everything has just been cut, which is great when you have too many layers, and I will undo that. And I can roll back a little bit, and I can hit this other button for start-stop, to play and stop. Back in the day, the old editors had the start-stop button. Yep. They still do, and all configurable. So there's one other thing that it does. So that alone is pretty cool, that you can skip around and edit, and it does a couple really neat things. So I'm going to move ahead here over to this. I got a video here, and then I'm going to come over here to this image.
All right, we've got, while you're doing that, we're looking for a model number or a better title. So, because we've got some people trying to find a link to buy this thing. What's the name of it again?
It is P-A-L-L-E-T-E, Palette. Just search for Palette App.
Palette App.
And you can actually zoom in there and see the name.
Oh, yeah.
P-A-L-L-E-T-E?
Yes. And if you guys can't find it on Google, I will help you find it on Google. So it's there.
We'll have a link for sure.
It looks like palettegear.com, PALETTEGEAR.com.
And bottom line is, if you spend an awful lot of time in the editor, this will keep your hands off the mouse. This allows me to do something crazy. I use my left hand instead of my right hand when I'm using this tool, which is one of the reasons I started using it. If you mouse everything with your right hand, you get a cool arm brace eventually. It's pretty cool. It looks good.
Lee has a cool arm brace that he's not wearing for the show.
I have a cool arm brace that goes with using your right hand too much for editing. So what I want to do here is I'm going to come over to this image here. And let's see, where did you go? Okay, so here's an image. I can click on that, and using my slider, I can scale that with a slider. It's a tactile feeling. I can bring it up and down until I get that image to be exactly where I want it to be. And it doesn't seem like much, but when you're running around on this timeline and you've laid all your images in, and now you got to go back and size them all, and you have to click and drag numbers to get them left and right, sliding this slider, there's a wee moment that happens in there. Yay, I'm not clicking on numbers trying to get a result. I can do it. I can eyeball it. Yeah, I agree. That's how I felt. And the other cool thing is a slider here that I can play with opacity. So I can make it invisible. I can make it super bright. I can play with all that. And I found that opacity and scale was something that I was doing across the board a lot on images and transitions and everything else. So this is a completely different way other than using your right hand on a mouse. So that isn't cool enough, but wait, there's more.
Uh-oh.
So down here is my audio. I'm going to tell the palette I now want to go to audio. So for those of you who have ever played with keyframes, if you've ever argued with a keyframe, if you've ever found yourself trying to get an audio fade right where you want it, if you're familiar with Premiere and Final Cut, both have the same thing. There are these evil little buttons you click here, and as you try to drag this to the left, what happens? The decibel range goes up, it goes down, it does whatever it wants to, and sometimes you forgot what it was before, which means you get to hit Command-Z about 14 times before you unfix what you just fixed.
Yeah.
With this guy here,
Final Cut Pro doesn't let you to do the audio like the rubber band. Like you used to be able to click and make it go up and down and drag the little things. Or am I thinking GarageBand?
You're thinking GarageBand.
Yeah, Final Cut Pro will let you do that.
Final Cut definitely
has them. It's just not easy.
It's just not easy. Premiere has a bit more. And by the way, with Premiere, you can set it to do all your audio editing in Audition if you want. But what I like is when I import something into Premiere, in my opinion, the audio should have already been cleaned up before you put it in there.
Right.
And if you put it in messy, your workflow is backwards. Now you get to try to fix it in Premiere. So if I click on this right here with my palette, I can just scroll this wheel. And do you see that keyframe just moving to the left or moving to the right by me turning this wheel? It's not going to go up. It's not going to go down. It's not going to have an unexpected finger twitch and go all over the place. I'm turning a wheel. And if I got to move it a whole lot, I push down on the wheel and it will jump 5 spots at a time. This is perfect when I use the same fade across a bunch of different videos. It's pretty nice because we can always just use our playhead to where about we want it to be and just come over here and say, hey, that's where I want it to be. A quick turn of my wheel and HR done's and stuff. It's over.
The hardest thing I find in Final Cut Pro is when I know I want my playback head right on the actual last frame. It took me forever to figure out what the last frame looked like, and then I finally saw that they put a little bracket in the bottom when you're on the very first frame of a clip, and on the last frame of a clip they have a little bracket. But it took me forever to figure that out, and so I was going by the timeline, and I thought I was on the very last frame, but then realized I was like on the second to last frame, and right. Things got really weird, and I was like, why is that happening? And so that
messes up all your transitions.
So I'll give you one piece of advice. Zoom early and often. That happens because you haven't zoomed in enough. And I'll show you what I do personally. This works for Final Cut or Premiere. I do it all the time. I want to sweeten this right here. What I will do is I hit the Z button to turn on my zoom, and I drag a box over this, and it zooms me in unbelievably so I can really see, and I'm not going to be off a frame or two. And then with Premiere, you have your minus button. I can just minus back out. It's pretty easy. But if I have my cool palette application, that's even easier because I come to edit, and now my zooming in and out is done with the wheel. So I can zoom in and out so quickly. It just cuts the speed. It cuts the delay down.
The trick that I ended up using that I figured out was using the snap, because then I normally hate the snap. It pisses me off when I try to do detailed work, but it'll snap you to the end of a clip and put you right on that last frame. And that's when I started seeing the little thing, and that helped.
Yeah.
It's a total kludgy fix, but it worked.
Well, that's a good thing when you turn on Snap on Final Cut, because it allows it to do that. The advanced move for you guys who use Premiere, if you hold down the Shift button when you drag your slider, guess what it does?
Oh, it snaps.
It snaps. Oh. So I don't need a snap command. I just hold down Shift and it does it automatically. So they, instead of adding a whole Final Cut snap, which by the way, then it snaps on every single thing that you dragged over, which can also get old. So being able to hold down Shift and engage that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, so you know what? We're just past the 30-minute mark. I am not going to take my commercial break because we want to try to get to all these questions. So let's take a quick break from the geeking out on the hardware and the software stuff and just cover a few of these questions really quick, sort of lightning round style, because we have so many.
Sure.
So let's do that. The first one is, I always struggle with getting good lighting. What are your tips, hacks for setting up lighting on a budget?
Okay, first good tip hack for setting up lighting on a budget. Believe it or not, if you work in a corporate environment and you find yourself recording in the same place often, what you can do is get all the gear you have and hire a lighting consultant for one day to help you light yourself properly. Take 1,000,000 pictures of that, record that video, and then compare everything you light to that so you know what it's supposed to look like. Most of the time, we haven't really got ourselves lit right at all, and then we try to get back and make that happen. And that's where the challenge comes, is you find yourself trying to reinvent the lighting wheel every single time. And if you do not have a China globe yet, which is a light with the white fixture around it that softens the light, or a light with umbrellas on it, Amazon, $100. You can buy a lighting kit that comes with the umbrellas on the front of it. Start with that. And then you need someone to tell you that you're lit properly. Because if you don't know how to light yourself properly, how will you ever know that you're lit properly? You need someone to tell you that looks good. And then now we're good.
Awesome. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Thank you. We could talk lighting like all day long, but I'm gonna refrain from showing my whole setup and all that, and just jump into our next question. If we end up with more time, I'll do a snap and share it with what I've got, because I do have those box lights in here. Let's see. Let's see, Mark, I'm not really too sure. I'm not really clear on your question about storyboards. He asks storyboards to include camera, lights, settings, angles, or limited versus specified. So I think what you're asking is, should your storyboards include how to set up, how you want the lighting set up, how you want the settings done, what angles do you want? Things like that. Should you include that in your storyboards? I think that's the question.
Personally, I think there's two different documents we're talking about. I think one is your storyboard, which should contain all your content, which is all the vocals, the words that'll be spoken, and everything that's going to happen on screen in regards to text and all that in a post-production kind of environment. I think I often create a shot list, and I might do my treatments and all that in the shot list of what I want, how I want it to be set up. I've personally done it that way because I think almost like in HTML, you want to separate the content and the code, and CSS is meant to do that. I think your shot list is meant to be where you do that. So short list, separate doc.
Okay, cool.
Otherwise, you'll have a storyboard that never gets done.
Right.
Yep, cool. So do we have any samples of those types of documents, Sam?
I don't think that we've shared anything specifically with the TLDC. I've done other workshops and stuff where I'm presenting things with people and I give them my stuff. The most effective thing is the thing that you make that works for you and your organization. And I know people don't really like that answer, but that is the most useful answer because it's slightly different places, you know.
Yeah, but I think it helps people when they kind of see one to kind of get themselves started, right? To kind of, it's like you'll see one that somebody else has done, and you're like, oh, that's cool how they did that. I like that. So, and it looks like Craig dropped some samples in. We can share those links later too. So awesome, good job. Yeah. Quick question on pricing. How much is Premiere CC? Can I just get Premiere, or do I have to pay for the whole CC set? That's just too much. Do we know that offhand?
Yeah, it's $50 a month if you get the whole entire Adobe suite. That's for access to not just Premiere, but Audition I was seeing mentioned in here. That's what I use for my audio as well. You get Photoshop, you get...
We haven't even talked about Animate, which is the best part of the Creative Suite. Raise your hand if you've ever used Adobe Flash and thought it was cool. If anybody ever liked Adobe Flash back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day.
They repackaged Flash.
And I didn't say that, you guys. Somebody else said it first.
So bottom line is, if you know how to use Flash and you remember developing Flash back in the day, you can now use Animate and make animated videos, because Animate is basically Flash that renders out MP4 files or HTML5 files. So you can render out an MP4 file, throw it into Premiere, and time it. And you now know how to. If you knew how to do Flash back in the day, you now know how to make animated videos. So you just don't know it.
They rebranded it?
They rebranded Flash into Animate, and its export engine now comes out to MP4. And next thing you're going to say is, can you put those directly into Premiere and be the most awesome person ever? And the answer is, yes, you can.
Oh my God. Okay, so just to be clear for Colin, there is no way you can get just Premiere?
There is.
There is. I just think it's silly. You pay $25 a month for Premiere or $50 for everything.
Yeah, I think it's usually $20 US a month. I'm not sure what it is in pounds, but you pay like $20 a month for one program, where you can get all the programs for $50.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Craig has a great point that I prefer After Effects for that. Just like most people would like to use Photoshop if they knew how. Most of them can open it, resize the video, and that's pretty much all I can do in this tool. And guess what? It's better than everything else.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, cool. Next question. Are there any lessons you learned in combat that translate over into the training world that you use on a regular basis?
Listen early and often. Most people would rather talk than listen. And in combat situations, while your mouth is open, is when you develop some injuries to heal from. That's what I learned.
I'm sure you had to that. There was a lot of opportunities to practice and get feedback.
Yeah, and some of that feedback is more direct than you expected.
I love it. It's a great answer.
I'm going to carry this feedback around until it heals.
All right. Any tips for streamlining putting on-screen text into Premiere? It really slows me down when creating process videos.
Two things on that. One, most people use text completely wrong in Premiere when they should be using a if you're going to reuse it, let me actually show real quick. See if this made it in here. It didn't. Never mind. That's honestly, that right there is a whole other show. And I would say go to YouTube and look at text animation Premiere, because I could tell you this, or the 14-year-old kids that taught me on YouTube could teach you. There's a lot of videos on it. And what it comes down to is you basically create a big block of text and then you duplicate that like 7 times. And then you just remove elements from it. And now it looks like After Effects. It looks animated. It looks beautiful. Actually, Sam, is that off?
Yeah, no, I can do it.
Do we want to show this, or do you have a lot more questions? Because I don't want to derail that question.
Yeah, we've got a handful more questions. Though, you know what? Let's turn it on. Yeah, let's get this part started. But while we're getting this set up and getting ready to talk about it, let me go to another question, then we can come back to it, because I think there's some quick hits here we can get to. Let's see. Oh, I think we've kind of discussed this. Myra says, have you integrated After Effects into your videos? If so, what are some tips? I would assume the answer is yes, and we're going to get to some of those tips.
My thing about After Effects is there better be a good business case for it, because it's going to add almost quadruple the timeline for the project, because you have to go back and forth. If I can find a way to do it simpler in Premiere without bringing After Effects in, I will. I find that sometimes you spend an awful lot of time in After Effects animating something that didn't really deliver much for the learning part of. It ends up becoming a dancing bear if you're not careful. It becomes a whole lot of cool animated stuff that really didn't solve a problem. So
and it's got a much steeper learning curve too than
much steeper, and it's much more likely you're going to animate something that looks 50% good and the other part is downright awkward. Is what happens a lot with After Effects. And what I would say is most of the people I know who are good at it are really flipping good at it, and those who aren't cry a little.
There's other ways
to
cool. Most of the same thing too. Like you were telling me about the Photoshop files, dragging in and out, and being able to use things like the opacity or whatever that comes in as a layered file that you can then stack stuff up directly from that Photoshop file in your timeline. And you can do some of the kinds of things that you can do that are simple things, like don't use After Effects for. Do you want to show the reveal of the text you have on screen here? Yeah,
so this is just an example. I wanted to do animated text, and I would normally have to do this in After Effects, right? I'd have to go out and do it in After Effects, and it would take a while. So what I did here is I took this same big block of text, which there's all the text finished, and what I did is I made 5 copies of it, and I have crop reveal it as it plays. So the result is this.
Clean, renewable energy when you need it at prices you can afford. Making energy one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, I can't see what's happening, by the way.
Yeah, it's a little light for the camera.
It's going to be tough for it to do here, and I think the frame rate's too slow. So anyway, this would be great. We'll have to show it.
I'll play it one more time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You can have clean, renewable energy when you need it at prices you can afford. Making energy one less thing to worry about.
So there's nothing spectacular going on here, right? But the way that he's constructed it in the file is just like nothing spectacular. It's actually very simple. It doesn't require a steep learning curve. It's just a great way to make that effect happen.
So what I do is quite simply have a bunch of layers of text, and I use crop to reveal the text through keyframes. So they're invisible with crop, and as the text is spoken, the crop reveals the text line by line, and you need a copy of the text file for each line, and you're revealing it line by line. There's a bunch of YouTube videos on this. It's a really cool way of doing it. And I could do it in After Effects, but now I'm working in 2 applications, and now I have 2 files and 2 chances of something to become corrupt.
Yeah.
Something wrong. So this might be an interesting time to ask this question. Gina asks, I often create content that needs to be translated in 3 to 4 languages. What is your strategy for producing videos that you know will need to be translated, i.e. text on screen voiceover?
First thing is, it really depends on the languages you're translating to. If you are translating to Russian, then you need 5 times the amount of space, because Cyrillic takes up a whole lot of space. That's just necessary. 2, if you're going to be localizing a whole lot of text, when I worked at Autodesk, we had to localize everything to 9 languages. And the bottom line was, we minimized the amount of online text, and we used images to get that point forward, but images with no English writing on it. So we didn't lean on it if you're going to localize. If it's going to be Spanish or French or something like that, it's not a big deal. It's all still language and words and letters that you can understand. But the second you start moving to Chinese, Japanese, or Cyrillic or something like that, now really test the waters and put less screen on. Because if you do a bunch of After Effects animations, ask Sam about this, all the cool animations we did for one of our YouTube certified videos. That resulted in almost, I think the video cost $3,000 to develop, and it cost $23,000 to localize.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the more that you know about that design consideration up front, the better that you can design for it, right? So adding on, oh, and can we have this in 9 different languages at the end of the project, which is what happened in that case. We didn't know about it up front. They thought, oh, this is so great and successful, you know, let's roll this out in all these places.
Now let's translate it, but let's not tell them we're thinking about it, because we want to see how it looks first. Oh, yay, it looks great. Now let's tell them we'd like to translate it into 9 languages.
Right. It changes how you design what's going to be on screen. So it's a complicated problem. It's really good to scope that as much as possible up front.
Same thing with Storyline. If you're using Storyline and you're using small text boxes, and now we go to Cyrillic, guess what?
Yeah.
Your entire freaking slide is now the line of text you just did. Same thing. Press the pause button. Pause. It's going to be bad if you use too much text.
Got it. And I think, what do they call those? The graphic designers have a word for like those character-based languages, like they're like 2-bit languages, or what do they call that? It's 2 characters or something like that. I don't remember. It takes up like, I can't wait for someone in the comments to tell us. Yeah, somebody get in my head quickly. It's called something. Somebody's like, because back when I had to deal with this a lot, people were always saying, well, yeah, do you deal with a lot of languages that are, and then there's a word for it, and I can't think of it. But anyways.
Greg seems to think it's 3 to 1.
Maybe it's just a character thing. I don't know. Okay. Cool. And okay, so last question here. Thank you for your service, Molly says, and I will echo that. What do you prefer best and why? 1-way or 2-way live streaming?
Whoa, I think that's a better question for you, to be honest. I prefer to appear on them and not have to do a lot of work.
I prefer 3-way live streaming myself. I'm anxious to get to the question where we ask, how in the heck did you get that DSLR to stream?
Yeah, we can show that. So this was a lovely Christmas gift, right? For Lee and his wife. It's a Canon 80D, and maybe Lee, you could show it off on your screen, and if we could.
I'll be Vanna, sure. I'm Vanna White.
Yeah.
Oh, here, let me get that going here.
I see you. Okay. So ultimately, it's not the camera that's amazing that we're doing right now. The camera has USB cable connected to it, and we're doing a live view through the camera. No big deal, right? You just put on live view, and the computer can see what the camera's doing. But Sam's genius was to simply share his screen. And he's sharing an application. The application he's sharing happens to be the Canon Live Viewer application. So the result is you see what the camera sees as if we're using it as a webcam. Downside is it makes the camera a little warm and it goes through battery pretty quick. But what we're finding is the depth of field that you get from a Canon 80D glass
that's so cool.
compared to what you get out of a webcam is a little unbelievable. The quality level is mind-blowing. It makes me giggle just a little bit. Oh, and by the way, guess what you can't do with a webcam? You can't zoom in like that.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. What's the camera?
Okay, so let's get into the real nitty-gritty of this. So you've got a USB cable going out of that Canon DSLR. It's going into a Mac, and the app that you have open is just the Canon Live View app.
Yes.
Here you go. So now you get to see the real magic here. Yes, this is my washing machine, and yes, this is my laundry room, and this is really happening right now. This USB goes in here, and Sam is basically doing the remote live view window, which this is the Inception effect. Let's all make the song now. He's just sharing the screen, and the application is the EOS utility.
Yeah, this is what comes with the camera. It's a free downloadable app that works with a bunch of Canon cameras. This just happens to be a particularly cool Canon camera.
So if I were to do that, could I use my DSLR instead of my C920 to get this kind of shot that I've got right here, except with greater depth of field? Yep.
And Nikola Tesla likes it.
Yes. And there's all sorts of, things that you can do to adjust the shot. And there's other functions that you can do with the depth of field or how it is that it focuses. Right now we have it on the find faces kind of function, which makes it a little easier. And then I was manually zooming it and things like that. But yeah, there's a great shot. Like Lee just set the camera down. That's all he did. This is not something that you can do with a webcam.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that it does not feed it directly into the Crowdcast app.
No, it's not.
Like Crowdcast does not recognize it as a webcam that's selectable. So what I would have to do would be to play it in this viewer app and then just constantly screen share.
Yes.
Screen sharing, that's correct.
Yes. And the one thing you must know, you don't want to do this for an 8-hour thing because it's going to heat stuff up. But it's great for an hour live stream. And ultimately, when we do filming, I do a bunch of interviews where I work. We go and talk to sales reps and installers and cool people and capture their stories. We record this, but sometimes we'll connect it into the computer so the computer can see what you're seeing. And the magic to that is I can transfer a quick file over into the computer, drop that into Premiere, and turn on green screen real quick to make sure that it keyed and everything right there on the shot. And then I don't end up in the studio later going, oh, yay, it was too dark and I can't key them out. They just turned into Kermit. Isn't that great? You can do a quick test like that when you're connected. We just found a workaround to use it as kind of like a webcam.
Yeah, Chris is commenting, like a field monitor. Exactly.
Cool.
And that's the EOS software that comes with it.
Awesome. All right. Well, you know what? We're down to 5 minutes, which totally sucks because I got a zillion other questions I want to ask. But, man, what should we do, Sam?
Well, do we have more questions that we're still?
We've gone through the Q&A. My first time ever in my entire life doing this. I've answered all the questions in the box.
Oh, great. We had a few too. Well, there are other questions about the latency drop and everything. Again, we're just using the screen sharing app here. So you can actually record things that are screen sharing. There's things like, Minicam or whatever. Like you can get stuff like that and do something similar with that.
OBS is great. If you want to really mess with this stuff, I love OBS, just playing around with it. It does not feed. There is latency if you try to feed OBS into Crowdcast or Facebook and all that kind of stuff. It's about a 10-second, 15-second pause, but you can do some really cool things. So if you're not doing this type of interactivity with multiple videos, you're just like doing a cool studio shot and you're pushing it and you're just pushing that stream out to a bunch of sources like YouTube or or Facebook or Periscope or whatever, then it's great, and you can do some very, very cool stuff. But it doesn't work so well because of the latency for this kind of interactive stuff.
Yeah, and I think one more thing. I saw a couple of questions around After Effects. I just want to clarify. Oh, and make sure you share everyone the Alex Gray image.
Yeah.
Cool. The big thing that I think falls apart is people go to After Effects because they think it would look cool, and I would just go up another level. Let's say I use this tool and it worked amazing. What would happen? Oh, well, they would get this message. Could you do that message without involving another complicated program? I use VideoScribe for whiteboard animation, but if I use VideoScribe for whiteboard animation all the time, people get sick of the freaking hand drawing stuff. Yeah. But if it draws something for accent, for focus, for a main point, for a takeaway, now we've done something. But if you try to make a whole 3-minute animation with VideoScribe, eventually you'll be like, I get it. It draws birds. Moving on. So you can't overuse anything, including After Effects.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Great question there. So we've got about 3 minutes left, unfortunately, but man, what's some great, fantastic tips. I thought Sam was going to say, you know what, we're running this DSLR through this $3,500 box that converts the analog to digital and makes it all awesome. But
technically he is. It's called a MacBook Pro.
Yes,
it's just a USB cable. Yeah, it's nothing crazy.
But so the audio you guys are using, is it all coming through that Snowball?
Yes.
Believe it or not, guys, the Blue Snowball is the best in the world for one reason. It's a cheaper mic, so it doesn't pick up as much as the Yeti, and its noise canceling removes all of the echo for us. When I use my Blue Yeti here, it picks up a lot of other stuff. It echoes. I hit the table. It picks. It's the Blue Yeti is almost too good for live streaming. So every time I have a Yeti, but I use the Blue Snowball for all of this because it continues to be a pretty amazing. And I bought this one; it was $200 and brand new many years ago, and it's still awesome. I love the Blue Snowball.
But you can pick them up for like $40.
$40 now.
Yeah. And for us to be without headphones, talking to you, it's important that my computer has the mic muted, and his is the microphone, and there's no audio coming through the camera. There's only one audio source when you're doing multi-cam stuff like this.
Yeah. Otherwise, save the dolphins. Save the dolphins.
You will hear them cry.
You will hear them cry.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, this has been fantastic, man. Again, so much more we could probably talk about. But Lee, thanks for taking the time to hang out with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and if people want to find you, Lee, where do they do this?
Lee Rodrigues. Let me just type it in. I have fingers. They type.
And we noticed you don't have a Twitter handle.
You know what? I keep telling everyone I'm going to try to get on Twitter, but I'll be honest. I'd rather go camping than mess with Twitter, so that's what I do. I just don't care enough. I'm not going to lie. I go outside and talk to human beings in person.
There you go. I love it. So you're obviously into video and imagery and stuff like that. So are you an Insta guy then?
Believe it or not, I'm not much of a social media guy. I talk with family and friends occasionally I like to log into Facebook to fight with family.
Perfect. All righty, Sam, anything else from you, my friend?
No, just have a great weekend, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for tuning in to another fun Video Friday. We've got some other great Video Friday guests coming up in the next couple weeks. I'm sure, Brent, you can talk about the lineup for next week in general. But thanks so much for tuning in and letting us geek out a little on all this fun stuff. It was so great to get here last night and talk with Lee about this. I'm like, yeah, we should do that. Oh, we should do that. Hey, can we do that too? So thanks for enjoying with us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, guys. Did you want to do a song out for us, or do you want me to just do the usual out, Sam?
No, you can do the usual thing. I think
all right. Excellent. Thanks. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us today. You guys have been fantastic. What a great crew hanging out for Video Friday. I hope you guys all got some value out of this today. And if there's anything else in the future you'd like to see us talk about or focus on, applications, any type of video, stuff like that, give us all your feedback. Or what you can do is head over to our Slack group and get in there, ask all the questions you want. We've got a channel for Video Friday. We've got channel for TLDcast questions. We've got all sorts of channels in there, lots of conversations going on, and lots of fun things to do. And if you are getting some value out of what we do here, please feel free to become a member. We do have a membership option that basically tells us, hey, we love what you guys are doing and we're getting some value from it. And we want to support you guys. And we really appreciate everybody that has stepped up and become a member. I think, today's show alone is worth the price of admission. I'm thinking, it would be very, very helpful on many, many different levels. But we also offer some extra added value, especially since it's not going to be long before TLDC 19 is going to be upon us. So you can start prepping yourselves for all of your discounts and all that good stuff if you jump into your membership now. So this has been another fabulous Video Friday. On Wednesday, I said, have a great weekend because I thought Wednesday was Friday. Oh, well, today I'm pretty certain it's Friday. So I can say with 100% certainty, have a great weekend. And I will see you on Monday.
Thanks, everybody.
You are so cool.